Hey, can you hear me okay?
I can't. Can you hear me?
Yeah, let me make sure you up loud so I can hear. Okay.
I
All right.
can be here.
Okay. So, let me get this thing started. So, this is the Iconoclast series. We are in 2021. And what the Iconoclast series is about is basically individuals that are breaking the mold, breaking the social standard of what we consider to be, um, valued in our society. And so, um, this week I have two guests back to back, which I of course didn't intend on having, but the way that things lined up, I feel like it's perfect. And the beautiful guest of honor that I have tonight is Miss Mora. And yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself and just share, who you are.
Okay. So everybody, can you? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Um, hey everybody, I am Imora. I go by Mora pretty much everywhere. I am so happy to be here. I'm 25 years old. I'm here in Houston, Texas. I've been here for about 2 years now, 2.5 years. Um, it's been beautiful. I met a lot of beautiful people. I make jewelry. I work with crystal. Uh, I do wire wrapping. Um, I had an event yesterday and I realized that like my oils, they're called Adornals that I offer, which is pretty much kind of like a perfume, but also like just a way to really adorn your body and kind of keep it with you throughout the day. So you can put it in your bathtub, you can put it in your shea butter blends, you can put it in your coconut oil blends, like anything like that. Um, that has always been, people were really drawn to that. So offerings like that I have as well. Um, I offer Shea Butter because it's really cold out. And naturally, I was making all these products for myself. And I wanted to have a platform where anything that I created pretty much I could offer to people as a way of creation or creativity, you know what I mean? But also just offerings for people to kind of bring home with them a little piece of my life. So my business and or brand is called Made by Mora. Sometimes I don't run it like a business. It's just kind of like lifestyle. And then other times I am very intentional about, how I'm running my business and handling my business. But it morphs a lot of times because it really is just me, um, just doing what I'm doing. And so I do appreciate all the love and support, from the people that I've met along the way. Um, so yeah. Hey girls, good to see you.
Um, I find it really beautiful that, it kind of stemmed from a passion that you had just making things for yourself and then transforming that as offerings and gifts to other people and, giving them the opportunity to find ways to, give self-love to themselves. So I really appreciate that. I feel like that's a beautiful sentiment. Um, and so tonight, the topic or the theme that we have for this particular live is the four agreements and what all entails in that, because it's that, but it's a lot more that's wrapped into it. And I think tonight, like pretty much every other live I've done, is very vulnerable. It's very aligned with what is going on with me in the present moment as I am continuing to learn and grow. And I'm excited. And yeah, I guess let's just start with, what words do you use to describe the individual that you are?
Hmm. Words I use to describe the individual that I am. I would say um, passionate, for sure. Very, very passionate. Those are my keys. You actually, no, those are Jarvis's keys. You need to find my keys. Yes, he said actually pull by Jarvis. Okay, I apologize for that. I'm a sister. I'm so many different things in in this life. So, passion, definitely. I would say I'm very passionate. I'm also a lover. Love has been like the epitome of my life. Like Imora naturally is, I want to say, a made up name. Like my dad, he told me he heard it in a song by a tribe called Quest. And most people just ask me, like, does it mean love? So since a very young age, like people have just been like, does your name mean love? Does your name mean love? But I've also found myself naturally fitting in the role of love, just like encompassing it, wanting it around me, giving it to others type of thing. So I would say I'm loving, I'm passionate, and I'm also assertive. Very assertive.
Yes, definitely. I believe that that is a perfect description of who you are as, an individual. And I honestly feel like it can be both. It can be that, your name means love, and it could also mean that you are making it what you want it to be as you go, like if you're, because your dad got inspiration from a tribe called Quest, the my personal page is called Of the Tribe, and I that is an ode to a tribe called Quest. But I believe that just taking that and feeling inspiration and creating a name for your child, and then from there just taking it as both. It's a creation, so love is intertwined with what creation is all about. So I think that that's true.
Thank
Um, okay, so we kind of talked about this in the beginning of the interview, where we were talking about the idea behind the Rose Golden Hour, because this live is essentially an extension of that. It kind of blossomed in the middle of me preparing that, and you talked about the fact that we all have aspects and perspectives to share, but then you talked about the importance of being able to archive uh, things that we do, and why do you feel that that's the case?
you. Definitely love this aspect of just like archiving talks and definitely like conversations between, I want to say, just intellects, you know what I mean? Because we're all in this space and we all have our own like perspectives of life. And so to talk about them and to get them out in a way like this, and using social media to do it, because I feel like a lot of times I can be really closed off to social media, and it can be used for, just like negative aspects to kind of push agendas or really flood you with certain emotions in the collective. But this is definitely a beautiful way to go back and to look at intellectual conversations that are had, and to really, I feel like it's usually divine timing, you know what I mean? Like I'll come across a live, one of your lives even, that like was last week or the week before or the day before type of thing, but it's divine timing for me. And also with archiving, I feel like this day and age, our communication, it's moving in a way that we may need to go back to the library, you know what I mean, and like actually look at and get our knowledge like that, but also face to face, you know what I mean, like exchanging information like this to where we're learning from someone speaking is very similar. So I think we're going to have to go back to more older ways of communicating, and this encompasses it while using new age technology like social media.
I agree. um because when I did the live with Bree, that was the first time I had ever done one in person, and I feel like it's a completely different experience.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we still have the phone there and it's recording us, but I think that it was also that we were sitting side by side. We weren't sitting, in front of each other, and I wonder what that would be like. But I think that we still were able to encompass that exchange, and we were able to spark a lot of conversation. And from her, it was a lot of transformation that was happening for her in that moment as well. So I do believe that the physical connection is that much more so impactful. Um, but you can also still get a lot from us doing it virtually, and in the case where we have to do it. But when I have been putting, because when I feel like it, I will transfer these videos onto YouTube, and I don't necessarily ask for people to go to YouTube to watch it, but part of me, whenever we do these lives, I have to rewatch everything so that way I can get an understanding of how I want to describe to someone when they enter the space. Um, and to even hear myself, to really go back in and see, what my body language was, what I truly felt in that moment, or what I learned from that, watching it as a viewer versus me being a speaker and hosting the live itself. So I think that it's a lot to be said about the experiences that we have when we're in it, as well as where we talk about a lot of heavy things. And for me personally, I do reference to a lot of people that are in my life when I talk about my experiences. So it's a way for them to go back in time to see how I've grown to the present moment as well.
Big.
Um, yes. And so someone asked, my cousin asked, what we were talking about. And so the topic for this evening is the four agreements. And so we're going to be diving into that in just a little bit. Um, we just kind of started. So if you're hopping in right now, that's where we're headed. Um, and so I think the other aspect of being able to do lives like this is the fact that somebody that needs to hear it can find it. And so just as you said before, when people hop on, because right now I can see 6 individuals, so it'll be 5, minus my phone, right? So you can hop on. If you feel like this resonates with you, you'll stay and watch till the end. Most people do. And if it's not for you or whatever, you end up hopping off. And I feel like that's essentially what it's about. I think that there's a lot of fear that comes with that, where it's like, oh, you're putting yourself out there, you're really diving into territories that can be harmful, or it can be a vulnerable space for you because you feel like you could get rejected or you could be talked about or whatever the case. And I really like to tackle that head on. And what ends up happening is you end up making connections that you never would have made. And at the same time, you know people will make decisions on how they perceive things, same way that you do with art as well. So um yeah. And I think that the other part of what made me fearful of doing lives was the fact that I didn't want this to be a red table talk. I didn't want this to be I've been seeing a lot on my YouTube of Ayanla Fix My Life. I've never watched this show, but it's recommended to my phone all the time. It's a lot of scripted, what we think we're supposed to believe, true conversation and therapy and, talking through things is supposed to look like.
Yeah. With
Um, yeah.
I just came across Ayanla as well, and I didn't know that she had this whole segment, but there are older books that she's written, and she's a whole Yoruba priestess. I found out, like, and the book that I came across was written, or I believe like published in 1995. So like it's called Value in the Valley. It is the most like, it's a Bible. It really is for Black women, and I'm gonna actually go grab it real quick.
Okay.
Ayanla now, I'm not too sure about either. And I've seen her well, no, I haven't really seen a segment, but I know that it's like mainstream. So I'm kind of on the fence about it. But knowing, like finding out that she's a Yoruba priestess and the work that she's done is it's out of this world. But this is basically, it says, a Black woman's guide through life's dilemmas. And in it, she talks about just using the word Black woman and like how words themselves, how we can use them. But she's using Black woman to reach the masses, but more so doesn't use the term Black to identify her people. But it's just a beautiful, beautiful book. So I encourage anyone to get it. I don't have the cover on it right now because I'm the type when it's a hard cover, I'll just take the soft cover off, but I'll post it on.
In the description,
Okay, perfect.
because I'm gonna watch back, take notes on what to feature, and I'll list it there for anyone to copy it. Um, and you spoke about imposter syndrome. So what? I mean, we have a definition, but you talked about it in the fact that you were experiencing that. And I would like to dive into that for a little bit and see if we could all be honest, if that's something that we all face from time to time.
Uh, so definitely imposter syndrome came, and it hindered me from using my voice, honestly, if I'm gonna be honest. It really did. And last night even, like, a message came to me where it was it's so funny how these things align, but like, I kind of get in these moments where it's like, um that's not my job. You know what I mean? If you get what I'm saying, to where if there's something that you feel you need to speak on, or if it's something and another person is involved, or maybe if it's even you're involved and it's just a situation to that extent, oftentimes I can get that's not my job. But on the other end of that is kind of like, why me? You know what I mean? Where it's like, when something is my job and my responsibility, it can be like, wow, like I really have to go do this right now. So looking at the two extremes for me, I realized that that's usually the problem, because I'm looking at a situation like that's not my job, when it's the balance between the two, to where you take responsibility for what it is that you have control over, which would be your job, and then also things that feel out of your control, where it's like, wow, why me? Why do I need to be doing this right now? So when it came to my voice and using my voice, it was more so I was just in this space where I feel like I didn't have things to say. It was like, why would anybody want to hear like what I have to say about something? Or more so, like, they probably heard this already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest kind of form of imposter syndrome that I experienced. Stop it, kitty cats. Uh, excuse me. Um, that I experienced because of when I will go through situations or have divination messages, it just that I feel would be useful to somebody, anybody. Oftentimes I didn't speak on them because it was kind of like, well, why would anybody really want to hear what I have to say? Or that's not really my job to speak on that. You know what I mean? Like, I know I'm kind of going through it simultaneously, but I don't know. So yeah, I can get caught up and keep going with it. It's not my job, but the point is to not get caught up in that and not let imposter syndrome or fear or anything to that extent really stop you, because you know it can be the littlest form of just sharing your truth that helps somebody else. And a lot of times what we go through naturally is to help someone else. Like, we don't really know that when we're going through it, but someone else can benefit from you speaking about what you've been through, or telling your truth, speaking your truth.
Yeah. So I found like just a very laid out text of what imposter syndrome is supposed to mean, and it's a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And I think that that correlates to literally anyone. And I feel like you can you can be shifted to feel like you aren't the expert in your truth or the expert in your own experience. And I think that we get caught up in trying to aspire to be a certain way, or to be a certain individual, or to meet these certain requirements that have been presented for us, that we kind of lose track. It kind of goes in line with like birth work, where it's like you have to have these certifications to prove that you are a birth worker when it is your birthright, or you can be self-taught. And I feel like there's so many different things you could fill in the blank for that. And yeah, I want to really question if that's something that we all face and not just certain people, because I feel like fear is something that is rooted in most emotions that are not um joy.
Yes, anything outside of joy.
For sure. And so I think another thing that you touched on that was very important was the fact that there is an importance of letting more people into your sacred space. And so I want you to kind of dive into that and what that means.
Yeah. So, I don't even remember what day that was that I went live within the past couple weeks, but that was one of the first times that I had like gone live to just talk. I didn't even have a real reason. It was just kind of, I felt called to go on live and speak. And within that experience and a lot of the experiences thereafter, I realized that a lot of people are not, they don't really get a chance to get to know me or to really know like little things about me. I've realized that I kept a lot of things secretive, but not on purpose.
Mm.
Little baby, what you going through, girl? Excuse us. Everybody trying to make an appearance. My cats came through eating crumbs
Yeah.
on the floor. Everybody's making an appearance. But yeah, I realized that I keep a lot of things secret. Like I had a couple friends reach out like, when did you cut your hair? When like I had cut my hair in October, I think, and it wasn't a secret, you know what I mean? Like it was just kind of something I hadn't posted since then, and my profile picture still had me with a head of hair. Like it was just something that I don't know, I just didn't really think was that important to showcase or you know, just move through. And so I realized that it's time for me to let people into my sacred space and to know a little what that looks like for me, and just share little bits of myself. Of course, boundaries is a really big one, and that's something I've learned over the years, because I am a lover and I'm a giver, and I'm a receiver. You know what I mean? Like I really had to learn how to receive as a giver as well, because sometimes that alone is enough appreciation. You know what I mean? That's like how we show appreciation to someone who gave us something. So it's something that I worked on being on the other end of that. But yeah, like there's a lot that can be learned from it, and we can live in ritual. I think that's the biggest lesson in itself, because everything we do can be turned into ritual to the point where it's sacred now. You know what I mean? Like you're taking a shower, it's sacred. You're washing your body, you're cleansing, you're constantly just thinking about it. You're making it into a ritual. You get out of the shower, you adorn yourself with your oils or your shea butter or whatever it is, even if it's lotion. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to get so caught up on exactly what it is as well. You could be eating fried chicken, you could be eating Popeyes, but that's why we pray over our food. You know what I mean? We give it intention. You say, okay, thank you for this nourishment. You give your food meaning and intention to where it's ritual now, and it's not taking away from the fact that it's not that good for you, or you know what I mean, it may clog your arteries, but like in reality, it's really what we give our attention to. So I find that showing more ways that I engage in ritual, and just like with my teas or just my plants, things like that. I've just been trying to showcase a little more, even if it's just really minute. But yeah.
Yeah. I feel that because I think one of the things that people get caught up in is when you say the word ritual, they may not know what the meaning of that word means. It might be a connotation of what ritual is supposed to mean. It's like, oh, is this like a cult, or is this like some type of darkness or witchery? But it's like I feel like there's a lot of ignorance in that because um instead of just looking at what it means holding space.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a practice, it can be a habit, or something that you are doing that is pouring into yourself, or more clearly, something that you are doing that feels good,
Mm-hmm.
that feeds your soul. And so I want people to have more clear language, but also understanding what things truly mean instead of responding in a very intergenerational defense mechanism, because
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's something that's also a hindrance with actually like truly holding space for yourself. Um, and so now um, I would like, okay, so the second half we're going to be talking about experiencing traumatic experiences what the four agreements are actually about. And there are some very there's a lot of questions here that I'm going to pose to the public. And I really want people to really ponder this, because without it, we won't be able to make true change. So let's start with um, experiencing traumatic experiences. So if whenever you are ready, we flow when you are ready to flow.
Yeah. So I think too, let's talk about what the four agreements are before I
Okay.
kind of share. Um, but basically, so the four agreements is a book, and the book title is The Four Agreements, a Toltec wisdom book, a practical guide to personal freedom by Don Miguel Ruiz. And basically, the summary says ancient Toltecs believe life is a dream. We each live in our own personal dream. These come together to form the planet world that we live in. My father wrote the four agreements, and as the son, he used them to write the mastery of self. Yes, and I have that book as well. And the mastery of self is to achieve personal freedom through the mind and our experiences. So a lot of what I read about in the four agreements, which I'll go into, I was able to apply while diving deeper into the mastery of self. And also really just like kind of being shooken up by the fact that I wasn't doing a lot of what I feel like I could have been doing with the four agreements. But basically, the first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. And essentially, what that is saying is your word is it's your structure, your foundation. It's what pretty much you won't fold on. Like it's your boundaries. Um, it's your responses. It's your anticipation, if you will. It's kind of like your rule book, your morals, your guidelines, things like that. And basically, when you're impeccable with it, you do not put yourself in a position to kind of to curse yourself. You're always in a godlike state with your word, or yourself or other people. It's like you wouldn't use your word for evil, if you will. And let me actually get you the definition of impeccable, because that's a big takeaway. And it talks about it in the book. So it says, yes, impeccable is in accordance with the highest standard of property or faultless. And basically, another definition is not liable to sin. Essentially, when you're impeccable with your word, you're not sinning, if you will. You're always in a state of godlike, and that's like the way that I can explain it right now. Obviously, take your takeaways. Um, but so yeah, that's the first agreement. The second agreement is do not take anything personally. And essentially, with that, the agreement is saying that everyone's actions and behaviors are not they're not a direct reflection of how they feel about you, but more so a direct reflection of how they feel in general. Everything we do is for ourselves, naturally. Even when we're doing things for other people, like it starts from here. Um, and so, yeah, don't take anything personal. People just kind of do them for themselves in their own worlds, things like that. Do not make assumptions is the third agreement. And essentially, with that, is it really so with this agreement, I feel it really taught me to listen when people speak, because it really takes a matter of like one, being impeccable with your word, right? So knowing you have a word to stand by, but also when you don't make assumptions, you know that you're speaking like all the words that you say you mean, and you're speaking with clarity to the point where you can get it across to someone and you would want them to take it for what it is. But also when you receive words and you hear people speaking to you and like, telling their truths, it's important to listen to exactly what they're saying. And if you need clarity, ask for clarity rather than making an assumption and oftentimes we make assumptions about a large amount of things. When we're overthinking, most times those are assumptions that we're making in our heads, about things that haven't happened yet, or situations, that are out of our control, or fear, can be included in that. And so when you make the agreement to not make assumptions, and of course with any of these agreements, it takes reminding yourself, it's like, okay, I said I wasn't going to make this assumption, I wasn't going to make assumptions, and I'm realizing that this is an assumption right now. Let me just leave that where it is and take the rest. But it's really important to just take things for what they are. And if you need clarity, if you reach out, ask questions, always inquire before making an assumption. And then the fourth agreement is to always do your best.
Mm.
uh and within that, honestly, it speaks for itself, but it's so much easier when you think about all the other agreements before that, because when you're impeccable with your word, when you're not taking anything that other people are doing personally, you're just taking it for what it is. Like, if it is instilling an emotion in you, or you do feel like something's coming up that's kind of triggering you, or emotions are coming up, it's important to sit with those emotions rather than trying to change them, excuse me, or tell yourself that you're not really feeling them. Like, it's important, excuse me, to really just delve into them. And so when you're not making assumptions as well, then you're doing your best. Like, it's really what you're capable of in that moment. It doesn't mean that you need to be, I don't know. It really just, it takes away the comparison, it takes away the competition, it takes away a lot of, I think, the turmoil we can put ourselves in when we're realizing what our loved ones are experiencing outside of us, or just the world itself, how things are perceived. Like, when you're really doing your best and that's all you're focused on, you really don't have too much time to be like, oh, is this person doing their best? Like, I will hope so, because like, that's their business, like, they know their best. And so we really just need to focus on our best, and move from there. So yeah, those are the four agreements that
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. I guess with that, I would like to question or put the question out there: what are you doing versus what you were taught?
mm,
Because I believe that you have the ability to develop what you believe, what your morals or what you stand on over time. You're not going to 100% have that together already. Now, if you were raised similar to me, where if my family was brought up in church or whatever the case, you can have those testaments and things to give you as a foundation. But even with that, there needs to be clear language in what you truly believe out of that, because it reflects in the things that you do. So that's one side. And then it's also what was taught by your upbringing, the people in your social circle, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what was presented to you as the norm, and is that what you truly believe? Are there parts of yourself that wants to search for more, that wants to look for new things? And if you have found things that you're interested in and have not integrated that into your belief system, why? I guess tapping into what do you truly what do you truly feel inside, and like, are we really saying yes to certain beliefs when we don't really know, or are we not acknowledging the things that we don't believe? Because I think that it kind of goes to that saying of like, you can do whatever all week, and then you go to church on Sunday, for example, and it's like, okay, I'm proving that I believe these things. But then once that's over, I'm back to doing what I usually do. So what do you truly believe in? Because I don't think that it's this particular thing, because you're not integrating that in your everyday life. And that doesn't have to necessarily be a bad thing. It just means that you have to truly figure out who you are.
yes. And based on, like you said, what like what are you doing versus like what you were taught. You know what I mean? It's really, it's analyzing that and getting to the nitty gritty, getting down to that trauma, those past experiences. And honestly, the mastery of self really talks about that, because like a passage that I pulled from today, um and I want to go get it, but I'm gonna just wait a little bit. The passage that I pulled from today talked about self-domestication and how humans are the main people who will self-domesticate. And the example that they gave was that a man, for instance, right, as a young boy, his grandma used to be like, you better eat all that food. I don't care, you know, if you're hungry, if you're full, eat it all, right? So in that moment, he's like eating, he's kind of crying, he's in despair because he's full, he don't want to eat no more, right? So he's eating, his grandma's like, and so he gets older. Now he's sitting at the table, he's eating his food. His body is telling him that he's full and that he needs to stop eating. He just keeps going. He keeps going, right? He feels horrible afterwards. His stomach is hurting, all this other stuff, right? But the biggest takeaway is that he did that to himself. It was a form of domestication to the point where the shame and the guilt that like he experienced to begin with, like he's putting that back on himself in this present moment, and it's years later. So the correlation is more than likely still there. You know what I mean? Like we put limitations on ourselves based on past experiences, and it's important to realize like what we haven't let go either. You know what I mean? And that's, it's not even just about letting go, but more so working through and accepting and holding space for. You know what I mean? Because it's not just easy to say, oh, yeah, my grandma did that to me, but I let it go. Like, did you really let it go? Because there's a lot of instances where there's a root problem. You know what I mean? There's a root emotion, not even problem, there's a root emotion associated with. And that emotion can come up in different instances. It may not look exactly like, you know, his grandma was not there. She may have been long past, you know what I mean? Like things that to that extent. But now he's upholding the domestication, and they're like the wording that they used in the book is, it really just makes sense, because you know you think about cattle and think about domestication of just animals, pets in general, just the control over, or you can't be doing this because this needs to be like this, you know. And we it happens in our upbringings, it happens in, you know, the children that we raise or we care for. So it's important to just be able to keep that in your mind, you know what I mean, and keep that awareness there, so when you're going through experiences you can say, hey, this feels familiar, you know what I mean. And when that happens, depending on what your word is, you know what I mean, you're going to take the time hopefully to sit through that. And if you don't have the space for it right there in that moment, you can say, okay, I'll revisit this, you know what I mean. Like recently, a friend of mine brought to my attention just like the importance of really holding space for where your mind is, like if you have the capacity or not to handle something, and to really give yourself that space and time. Because if you don't, it's okay to be like, okay, I'll handle this in the morning, or the rising, excuse me, because I really do not like using the word morning. But rising, I'll handle this in the rising, and I'll go from there, because my mind it's been racing all day, or I'm tired, or just all these different things. So it's important to just keep the introspection, keep the awareness as you're going through these experiences, because you're not always going to know how they correlate. But when you can be present, in your story and in your life, then you can connect the dots, and you can kind of make sure this doesn't happen again, or you can kind of combat it or hold space for it, so there is no shame or guilt or whatever the under, like it's a lot that I've been learning over these years, and it's got me to this point. But I still like have a lot to go and learn from, but also I'm constantly having to revisit and bring back to attention and focus. And sometimes it's daily, sometimes it's even hourly. um, Because I mean, it's even like when you set the intention for your day, right? You can wake up and you can say, I'm gonna have a great day, and you want to leave it at that, and that's fine. You can do that. But best believe throughout your day, there's going to be a lot of experiences that are going to be like, okay, you sure you still want to have a good day? And you got to be like, yes, my intention is to have a good day, despite the fact that my tire is flat. You know what I mean? Despite the fact that it's raining or I'm soaking wet. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still going to have a good day because I set that intention. And spirit will literally keep bringing that to the forefront to say, okay, this is what you said. You know what I mean? Like, now the actions have to follow.
Yeah, I got a lot from that. Back to the self domestication, the only thing that I can correlate to, um, similar to domesticating animals and things that we feel that we have sovereignty over or control over, would be a child. Like, that is typically, what has been shown, like, to treat as a more inferior individual. Not saying that this is everybody's situation, but this is majority of people's situations that I know, um, or that I've experienced, and what I do as a parent, because I'm not this parent that has, succeeded 100% on all of the things. I am dually facing the things that I don't do well, and processing trauma and things. And even in the moments when I know that I am like doing some horrible shit, I'm very aware as it's happening. And at the same time, I have things that I do feel like are beautiful aspects to a type of childhood that I can give my child. But I feel like that has to be a change, because ultimately what it is boiling down to is birth. It's boiling down to the experiences that we are passing down from our ancestors. Rose Gold Birth, are you a doula? Yes, I am. I am a birth worker.
Hey, Morgan.
Um, yeah, it dives into the source ultimately. And it just dawned on me, I saw something somewhere about the fact that our grandmothers, technically every woman, but our grandmothers carry us in the womb. They carry your mother. Your mother develops the ovaries and the eggs and all of that while they're in the womb. And you're in there. So then to even correlate that to when you give birth to that child, and you're passing down microbiome and antibodies and things to build their immune system from the very first woman in your family line, passed down. Like, you have to really hold space for that, like really process that is an intergenerational thing. So if you can pass down germs or antibodies, things to help you, there are things that are there to harm you. And you said chattel resonates with slavery to me. So if we are being taught to be a certain way about animals, if human beings were taught to be seen as animals, we are translating that to how we treat our children and making them feel certain ways in the things that we do. Some things we do are beautiful, but you have to also understand the duality. So you have to heal self as well as when you are raising children. And I think that people get it twisted, because it's like, oh, you have to be prepared. You have to have all these things to be prepared to raise a child, but you can have all of the things that American society can deem you to be a successful parent, but have a shit ton of shit that you got to work on to be the best parent. And so I really challenge people to really like hold space, think about that, process it, talk to other people about it, because now I want to ask the question of, what part do we decide to take responsibility
Mm-hmm.
of what we believe to be the truth,
Mm-hmm.
or what is important or not important? Like, when can you truly hold space and understand that this is what I am deciding to believe is the truth,
Mm-hmm.
and being okay with that, or realizing that you need to adjust things?
It's yes, and action that really is, because we're not always gonna have the answers. I'm gonna go grab this book. The mastery of self what I saw today was like, I'm gonna find it before I okay. What I found in here was talking about just the idea of speaking your truth and knowing that like ultimately you're not always gonna have the answers. Like, or you still have to understand that like yes, it's your truth, but there's still someone else on the other side of that. You know what I mean? That has their space to honor it as their truth or not. So when you're giving advice, when you're speaking on things that you know you feel are important to you, you still have to hold space for the fact that this person may not receive it. Like it may not be for them, it may not resonate with them, but you still have to hold space for yourself. And that's self-love, that's self-compassion, that's unconditional self-love, you know, because to honor that, yeah, you might be completely wrong in their eyes. You know what I mean? That may not be in any type of alignment with what they believe or what they see or perceived, you know, but what you gonna deny yourself? Like, so hold space, and then if you need to humble yourself and be like, sweetie pie, you overreacted, you know what I mean? Or you kind of took it further than what it needed to be. It's like there's space for that too, but you can do it with love. And you can hold and say, you know, I'm still growing, I'm still learning, like that's okay. Yeah, I handled this situation like completely left than I could have, or like moving forward, this is what I will honor, you know, like it's we can create that new word because there's always going to be morphing, you know, it's always going to be room for improvement. It's going to be like, okay, this worked this time, but it just didn't work this time. So it's time to revisit and revamp and take and move from there and leave the rest. Um, but I wanted to Yeah, okay. I found the passage about the boy finishing his plate. And I think I reflected on it well, so I won't go into it. But it's really important that, you know, we just realize that everybody has their own personal dream. So I'm gonna read this. It says, this is in the chapter called Unconditional Love for Yourself. No, I'm gonna read from the start. It says, in the dream of the planet, there are two powerful forces that shape all our agreements, attachments, and domestication. In the Toltec tradition, we call those forces two types of love, unconditional love and conditional love. Unconditional love flows from our hearts. We move through life and engage our living beings with compassion. Unconditional love is recognizing the divinity in every human being we meet, regardless of his or her role in life or agreement with our particular way of thinking. A master of self sees all beings through the eyes of unconditional love, without any projected image or distortion. Conditional love, on the other hand, is the linchpin of domestication and attachment. It only allows you to see what you want to see and to domesticate anyone who doesn't fit your projected image.
Mm.
Primary tool used to subjugate those around you and those around us and ourselves. Every form of domestication can be boiled down to, if you do this, then I will give you my love. And if you do not do this, then I will withhold my love. Every form of attachment starts with, if this happens, then I will be happy and feel love. And if this does not happen, then I will suffer. The key word in all of these attachments is if, which, as you will see, has no place in unconditional love. As we construct the dream of the planet, we have a choice to love each other unconditionally or conditionally. When we love each other unconditionally, our mirror is clean. We see others and ourselves as we really are, expressions of the divine. But when the fog of attachment and domestication clouds our perception and put conditions on our love, We are no longer able to see the divinity in others and ourselves. We are now competing for a commodity that we have mistaken as love. At its core, domestication is a system of control, and unconditional love is its primary tool. Consequently, the moment you start trying to control others is the same moment you place conditions on your love and acceptance of them. But you can only give what you have. The conditions you try to impose on others are the same conditions that you oppose upon yourself. When you self domesticate, you are attempting to control your own actions based on shame, guilt, or perceived reward rather than unconditional self love. As we saw in the example with the man who continues to eat after he is full, this is neither healthy nor happy ways to live. Unconditional love is the antidote to domestication and attachment, and tapping into its powers is a key step in becoming a master of self. In this chapter, we will look at the practice of having unconditional love for ourselves, first and foremost, as you cannot give to others what you don't have for yourself.
Wow.
And then it's like hearing all that, you're like, oh, like all these moments, it's you really, it always comes back to self. Like it really just always comes back to self. And so when you're operating from that space, all you can do is just really go within, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't mean like isolate, it's not to say like, no, don't come help me because I'm a horrible person who needs to just work it out for myself. No, like still open yourself up to beautiful experiences, still call in the love you want, you know what I mean? Even if you know that sometimes you place conditions on that love, like just work on it, just be intentional about being better if that's what you want to do, you know what I mean? Like we have to accept who we are and know that all of our experiences are mirrors of ourselves and our self-love that we give, or self-domestication, like it's just a matter of honoring and holding space for.
Yes. And I definitely agree with all of that. And I can relive moments in time where I put conditions on things or try to domesticate either myself or others. I can go back and relive moments that were of self love. And I think that continuing to be aware and to be, understanding of myself will help with that, because I don't want people to feel like you have to have it all together in this present moment. It's a process that you have to unlearn and relearn. So um and I also want to try to put that in context when it comes to things that are really hard, because you can navigate the four agreements or any of those things when things are, you know, within your scope of control, or when you feel like, things are not as difficult for you to navigate. But when you are in situations of stress, situations of even more specific trauma, or when someone brings harm into the space, how do you navigate that, and what does that look like? And so I want to kind of shift into that aspect as well, because I think that that's where we most times are. We are in spaces where we have lost, we're in the fog, and we're in the middle of the, all of the crazy, because of, the moments that are so big for us, and we're not really seeing the root, and we're not really seeing self in that, because it sometimes can be projected from outside spaces.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, so go into it here, and bear with me because I am nervous. It's just I'm not used to just, I guess, sharing traumatic experiences. But I don't need to do a backstory. I'm just gonna go ahead and get into it. But pretty much on Thanksgiving Day, I had experienced a form of sexual assault that to some people would be pretty minute, but to me it was very, very deep. There was a man there that is or was a partner of a past friend of mine, which I'll go into detail of because when I was analyzing that friendship, it felt like there could be conditions attached. And I want to speak to that later on moving forward, just with this within the situation. But her partner was leaving out of the kitchen as we were at a mutual friend's home, and he was leaving out of the kitchen and has swiped his hand along my butt. And I felt it in that moment, but it's not even a but. In that moment when I felt it, I instantly, it was like the fog came. I didn't black out, but I do remember being extremely foggy and just like clouded, and I was silent, and it was just kind of like I didn't really know what to do next. That's what I'll say. I did not know what the frick to do next. So what I did do next though was I turned around and I looked at the man and I gave him what my grandma calls the look of death. It's a look that since a newborn I've literally had, to where it's kind of like I see you, but also I'm not okay with what's happening right now. Like in my body there is like every fiber of my being is just not okay, like type of look. And it's kind of like I'll kill you, but more so with my energy. Like you knew you was wrong type of thing, don't do that. But so I gave the look, and I'm sure the person felt it. The energy in the room literally just kind of shifted, but I didn't really know what to do next. But so I'm giving y'all the turn of events as they kind of went down. So it happened. I'm flipping plantains. I got foggy. I give the man the look of death. I go back to the plantains. I can't focus. I text my partner. I'm like, yo, this man just touched my ass. He thinks he's low. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really know what's going on right now, but I don't want to have to kill him. So, like, I'm texting him. He's like, my partner's like, do you want me to say something? I didn't even reply to him because I'm seeing that, but my partner knows me and he knows that, like, to be honest, I don't want to ever be spoken for. So it wasn't going to be in that moment like, yo, you touched her, da 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 da. Like, what's up? What's up? You know, like, we can't really have none of that because in that moment, I still didn't even process my feelings. So it wasn't like I don't need somebody to go bark for me type of thing. So he knows that, he respects that, honors that. He's just worried about me. He's like, what's going on? Like, what do you need type of thing. But then again, like I said, I did not know what I needed. I didn't even know what to do next. So I'm standing there. I'm still just trying to keep it together. I'm texting Jarvis, and it's like, you know, I actually, no, I started to text him and then I just couldn't. So I go to my friend and I'm like, hey, can I talk to you for a moment? So we go in her room, right? Or no, I go in her room because she's like, yeah, just give me a second. I'll be right there. I go in my room, in her room. She comes in, and then the friend whose partner touched me comes in as well. So, and I never asked her to. So if you can see the turn of events, it's like in that moment, what my intention was with asking my friend to go speak was like, I need to process this with someone else. I do not know what's going on right now in terms of what I feel. It's just the fog, you know what I mean? So what I would like to do is just go get some clarity. So I wanted to go hold space for myself in that space. So the other woman comes in, and now this is our sacred space. If you can imagine, we've now set a sacred space outside of the traumatic situation that I've had in the kitchen. And you got to go through the kitchen, the dining room's right there, and then the bedroom, and it's like a bathroom down the hall, right? So I'm in the bedroom. I tell them what happened, but this is y'all, this is how I started off. I said, I'm not really sure if he meant to touch me or not. I said, but so and so's hand lightly grazed, you know, had swiped against my ass, and it made me extremely uncomfortable. And I did use language like it made me extremely uncomfortable, but ultimately what I was saying, and I did say this, was that I was triggered. Now, there have been other instances in my life, like at a young age, for instance, in fifth grade, and I was very developed for my age. It might have been the milk, the hormones in the milk. I don't know. I had like C cups in fifth grade, and my body was just like developed. So, excuse me, I don't say that as an excuse, but I'm just giving y'all an imagery, if you will, on my young body. But there were my peers in class, and some of them I still just kind of don't even like fuck with to this day, because it's like, what were y'all on? But I know that, I don't know what they've seen in their lifetimes. I don't know what was normal to them to that extent. So I don't fault them, but I know how I feel going through those experiences. And I felt a lot like a piece of meat, and just like, really, like, my consent didn't matter. Like, my life itself didn't matter. You know what I mean? Because there would be people, well, for instance, it was my birthday and I was wearing this really cute outfit and I had a skirt on, and I went to school, and it was like this one boy just kept doing everything in his power to look under my skirt, and it made me so uncomfortable. And I think he touched me that day. Like, you know how trauma kind of works. It's like, it was a real long time ago, and I really cannot remember if specifically he touched me, but I remember going home that day, stomach on all types of knots, just really not in a good space at all that day, because I just couldn't think past the fact that I was just really uncomfortable the whole day. And you never really know when somebody's uncomfortable or what they're going to take away as trauma. Like, to be honest, I just throw that little um tidbit in there. But essentially, so when people hear about this situation, like, oh, he touched your ass, like, like, you good, sis, like, ain't nothing really happened. But in the same breath too, it's deeper, because it's lack of consent, and it's lack of, well, really, because I went through what I went through before, it was really triggering, and ultimately it wasn't right. Like, you just don't touch somebody without their consent, in my world. And going through this situation and really tying it into the four agreements, like, I realized that I really did not have a word established to when I felt violated in a sacred space. Like, I didn't have a word to say, if someone touches you without your consent, chop their hand off. Something to that extent, which is what I felt in the moment, but I couldn't really act on that from my lack of word, or really it wasn't like clear or something I felt that I could call on in that moment, because of the fog, or just because I feel like all of us were kind of just taken all the way back. And it's Thanksgiving dinner. Like, this is my favorite holiday. If I am going to honor an American holiday, it's going to be Thanksgiving. I was supposed to go home to my family, but I had gotten sick like a week or two before. And with this pandemic, everybody's afraid to travel, even if you got the little bit of sickness. So all of these factors didn't really help, um, with the fact that now I went through that experience on Thanksgiving Day. So it really took a lot of unpacking, because it was a matter of having to sit with myself. I was having dreams associated with shame. Um, for, speaking my truth, honestly, I had many instances where I would just, wake up and cry, just kind of be like, why did that happen to me, type of thing. Because I didn't really know how to talk about it. I didn't really know how to express that was really traumatic for me, and just ultimately what I would not wish on anybody, but more so because I felt that people wouldn't really understand. But in that moment, and in those moments, I had to hold space for myself regardless. Like, I literally had to validate myself. I had to know that, you know, only you were there in all of those moments, and only you can recall exactly what happened, what you felt, what you experienced. So, and it's funny because I felt like I was combating that by going into my sacred space with my friends and being like, I don't really care like what his intentions were. Or I'm not leading with that, but I more so want you all to kind of like hold space for me right now, because I'm not okay. Was more so my like standpoint. And I think the biggest betrayal was that, like, she really felt that she was supposed to be in that room, and ultimately she her language when I mentioned what happened was, oh, I'm sure he didn't realize what he did. And it's like, well, okay, you can be telling me that right now, but in my logical brain, right this moment, you're telling me that a grown ass man has no control over his limbs? He don't know when he's touching another person? Like in reality? So he's a child. He has no nerve endings. Like, just make it make sense to me personally. Like, you're trying to negate my situation and the passion that I feel, you know what I mean? The assertiveness that I feel and the love for myself that I have, just explaining myself. Like, I knew in that moment, like, I wanted to fight, because it's like, don't do that. Please do not negate my situation, you know what I mean, for whatever it is that you may need. And that was what I ultimately had to sit with as well, and not in a judging way to say, oh, she just needed to lie to herself, you know what I mean, because she's a horrible person. No, there's situations in her life that maybe she hasn't dealt with yet, or isn't, there yet to hold space for me in these moments. And that's okay. But boundaries are really important, because best believe after I let this woman know that that did not work for me, like, we don't talk no more. I'm not in a situation where I have to be in a sacred space with you and you're denying my feelings, you know what I mean? Or you're not in a space where you don't have to validate them, but you can hold space for them. um and ultimately, I'm realizing that just people in my life who really can't hold space for me, and all that I encompass, it's just no longer uh something that I'm gonna chase. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you're doing me a favor by showing me that, and my boundaries won't allow me to continue to be in a space with you. You know what I mean? It's all love. It's always love. But that doesn't work for me. And the reason it doesn't work for me is because I would want to hold space for you. You know what I mean? And okay, this is even funnier and in alignment, because I was talking to my grandma, and she was the one who mentioned the look of death that I give, and she goes into detail about it, and she just really just started explaining it. And I wish you guys could have heard the words she was using, because I was like, really, grandma? Like, that's what I be doing to people? But she was like, you just don't take no type of shit with that look. Like, you just let the people know, right? But I'm letting her know about the situation, the trauma that I experienced Thanksgiving Day, and she's like, "You didn't go off on him?" That was the first thing she said to me. She said, "You didn't go off on that man?" I said, "Grandma, I didn't do anything." I said, "I didn't do anything in that moment, but just I couldn't move." So here's my grandma, knowing the person that I am, knowing, just how I am, being like, "Wait, you didn't give that man your wrath?" You know what I mean? So I was like, "Yeah, grandma, like, I was messed up, because it's trauma. It's deeper than just this one situation that I'm experiencing." And they took it very, very, very personal, to pretty much say, like, I mean, they felt so uncomfortable they had to leave after. Like, it was like they really couldn't sit there anymore, but I wasn't really doing anything. I went to the bathroom. I used the bathroom, washed my hands, and in that time frame, they were already um, packing up their things to leave. My ex-friend and her partner. So it's like, it just goes to show the space they couldn't hold for me. You know what I mean? And through the situation, but also my grandma was doing a crossword puzzle, and I didn't know she was doing it. Well, I knew she was doing it, but when she asked me, she said, "Do you know what the golden rule is?" And I thought she was like quizzing me. Like, I'm like, "No, grandma, I really don't think I know what it is, but tell me." She's like, "Oh, okay, no, I wanted to know because the crossword was asking what's the second word in the golden rule." And so the golden rule is do unto others would as you would want them to do unto you, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But
Yeah.
the word that she needed was unto. And like I said, when she asked me what's the golden rule, it was like I felt like I was being like charged up, but it's really important to focus on that golden rule, because it's I do feel like that's my golden rule. That is a word that I have established, and I've had that established since a young age. It's like, do unto others as you would do, as they would do unto you, or as you would want them to do unto you, type of thing too. Because I would want to hold space for people like that. Like, Like, dang, really? Okay, are you okay? You know what I mean? Like, just take it deeper. Take it outside of the situation that's actually happening. Get into someone's brain. Really get into their heart. What do you need right now in this moment? As opposed to, okay, all these facts are here. Let's look through the facts. Like, this is not Law and Order, y'all. Like, this is life. This is energy. This is healing. This is trauma. This is a lot of different things. This is like introspection. So it's deeper than, you don't want to hear that your partner grazed against my ass. And then too, he came from New York. My grandma was like, what she call him? A grazer. She called them a grazer or a feeler. And apparently that's her word for people who just inappropriately touch other women and try to pretend like, it didn't happen. Like, don't do that. And then, because this woman right here is going to speak up, you know what I mean? And like, whatever that looks like. But also, I know that outside of that, that doesn't change a person, you know what I mean? So I have to have a word established to say, okay, what are you going to do the next time somebody touches you and that's not what you want, and that's out of your consent? What are you going to do? And it really just prompted me to continue to just delve deeper. I took it very personal. I took exactly what she said personal. She said, I'm sure he didn't realize. I took it personal. That to me was not holding space to me, but that wasn't like it wasn't for me. That was what she needed to hear in that moment for herself, so that she didn't judge her partner or whatever the case, because I'm not going to assume either. That's where I can make an assumption. So it was like I saw all the instances where I didn't even live by the four agreements. You know what I mean? It wasn't a matter of like, oh, let me call in these four agreements. It was like after the fact. It was hindsight, pretty much. To where it was like, it was hindsight. It was to say, well, I can take this with me next time, and or I cannot. So I that was those were my some of my biggest takeaways about the day. I do feel like um I I have a lot of growing to do. I have a lot of growing and a lot of learning to do, and a lot more introspection to work through. Um, but I really had to validate myself in that situation. And it didn't it was like there were opportunities where I had loved ones be like, you want me to go find him? Like, what's up with the what's up type of thing? Like, because, consent is important. And if people are out here just kind of doing whatever, we really can't have that in our community. And that was another thing. Like, you came up in our sacred space and we hadn't had any problems before this. So now you're the one that you're like the intruder, if you will, coming up in here. And that's not okay for me, because a sacred space is a sacred space. We should feel safe enough that I don't have to worry about the fact that I'm wearing a skirt. You know what I mean? And so it was very synonymous and just like triggering for me, really triggering. I
It's a lot.
space.
So, and even so with that, because there's so many different angles. Just like when we went through this the first time,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's a lot of angles that I would like to take this particular experience because first things first, when we talk about the bridge of taking responsibility and also wanting to blame another person, I think the word responsibility gets confusing as well because you can feel like, oh, if I've taken responsibility, that means that I can't feel the feelings. Because I feel like when you go through disrespect, harm, just disagreements in general, or something really horrible, um, you can feel like, I need to suppress
Mm-hmm.
and I don't need to address the things that I feel. And you need to just completely remove that once you say, I'm taking responsibility and I'm moving on and this and that. But I feel like we need to have a time for processing the emotions. And I think that that's why your instinct was to hold space for yourself, as well as with people that you felt, um, someone that you felt safe with. And you spoke about the fact that when you can remove that person completely out of the situation, because you did have valid reason to feel anger, to feel distress, to feel sadness, to feel whatever you felt. But you also talked about the fact that when you can remove a person completely and use the steps to process the situation, um as well as taking the time to really go by frame,
Mm.
because you could even go back to all of the events that led to that particular moment, but what really matters is that you were able to identify that there was a trigger there, and
Mm-hmm.
there was a past experience, and there furthermore boils down to feeling violation,
Mm-hmm.
feeling disrespect, feeling like a piece of meat, disregard or whatever the case, and pinpointing that into now, and that's a process. That's a new part of the healing that you're going through, and yeah, I really want to think about that, as well as when we get through the experiences and when we are healing. You also talked about the fact that we want other people to go through that process with us when we're healing, and I think that comes at a later time. In the initial point, when there's something such as this particular situation, you can insert literally anything else here. You may have wanted that friend and that friend's other person and everybody else in the room and da 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 to go through that experience with you. And the initial thought or the intention was to have someone there, as you said, like, are you okay? How is everything? But at the root of it all, what has to happen first is you do those things for self, and then resonating with other individuals similar to the people that we found in our community that we love and everything. Like, we're gonna have those people that can hold that space because of the boundaries and the things that we set for ourselves. Like, this is how I want to be treated. So really taking that time to process, because right now, um that's why I felt like this live was very important, because right now I'm in a space of processing many things. um and yeah, just, and I feel like the other part, just like where your friend or ex-friend or whatever we want to call this individual, the defense mechanism or the response to that was, I'm sure he didn't mean dot dot dot, right? At the same time, she may have done that, you could have started to do, or you may have done, well, I shouldn't even been there in the first place, or we shouldn't even done this or that, or I should have wore something different, or I should have, or I should have said, everything has already happened
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So just like you can feel that about your friend or whoever the outside, factors are, you will do that to yourself. So that's why I say as well to really process and talk through or write down or whatever you need to do with yourself first.
Yeah. And I wrote a lot of letters to her. I wrote a lot of letters because at the end of the day, I wasn't even focused on that man. Like, I really wasn't, because the betrayal that I felt, you know what I mean? Like, it was all personal. Like, it was me in that moment taking it personal, and personally, like, that was what I felt I needed. But I had to release a lot of that. I really did, because it's a mirror. You know what I mean? And I really had to see, okay, I'm irritated by this within. Um, love you, Dorian. Love you, Spesh, Shiz, the both of you, and Taven. I really had to just, I had to see in the problems that I was having with her and the way she moved through the situation. I really had to see, okay, well, what did you do? You know, you do something similar to that extent, because that's just realizing that we're all mirrors, and like, there really is no right or wrong, and moving through the situation, it was for moments where I wanted to talk to her, I wanted to talk it through, and then it became kind of irritating because it felt like too much time had gone by, and then even in that, it's like, well, who are you to determine the amount of time somebody needs to come to you But then again, like when I did talk to her, it came from a place of rage because I had just heard about something else that irritated me. So we weren't in a space to really talk through and hear each other. It was kind of like, I'm going to point my finger at you, and I'm going to, point my finger at me, and, you're going to point your finger at me, and type of thing. So here we are. And even in those moments, you gotta chalk it to the game, and you gotta keep doing the inner work, and do it as if you're doing it with the person, but know that the person may not be involved at all on their own merits. You know what I mean? Like they may not want to hold that space for you, or they may feel like that's just not what they need. Like you have to realize that people are in control of their own lives.
Mm.
And so you have to take responsibility for your own life to move forward in your situation outside of somebody else. I feel like that's been my life's biggest takeaway. And a friend of mine really brought to my attention recently that I have a commitment to myself. Like I'm married to myself, essentially. And it took some time for me to even get there. But within all of that, it's like, that ride or die, like I'm that ride or die, like for myself. But it gives me space to do it for other people, and to really listen to them, and to allow them to show me, and allow me to love them. You know what I mean? Because I would want people to be like, hey, that did not work for me. And it's gonna hurt me. Like it really hurts me when I hear things like that, when people have to tell me about situations that like I've done them wrong, or just like hurt them. And you got to sit with that hurt. You really do. You cannot avoid that shit, because we're all out here just operating in our lives from our own perspectives. And so when you're in a situation with someone and you've hurt them deeply, and for one, okay, that person may not have said anything about the hurt that they experienced, right? But you also didn't check yourself to say, wow, am I going around hurting everybody I encounter? You know what I mean? Like, are my actions consistently in a place, like, is that my intention? Like, you really just you gotta check yourself before you wreck yourself. And it's not on other people to really to check you. It's more so on other people to take responsibility for themselves. You know what I mean? For their feelings, for their wants, for their desires, you know what I mean? For their manifestations, for the beds we make and then we lay in. Like, it's not to say that there's negativity to that. It's just literally honoring and owning your life, self love. And it's easier said than done. Like, it really is. I know there's plenty moments where I can be like, I just see like what another person is kind of like operating in, like the space they're operating in. Um, but the problem really arises. I don't bring it back to self.
Yes.
You
Um, yeah, I agree. Um, it definitely is the core of everything is self. And speaking of self, as I told you before, this live in particular is a response to a couple of things that I am facing right now in the present moment, or so for the past couple weeks, I would say. But um, it's quite a few things. So, but before I even dive deeper into that, I have experienced, someone violating me at a very young age. I want to say that was maybe first grade. Like I was in public school, like young, but my response wasn't that I felt, this was I instantly thought, I wasn't gonna bring it up to my family or anything like that, but I just didn't sit with it. I didn't really feel like I was sure what to do. But I didn't feel the feelings that you felt, as a fifth grader. Like, okay, I feel violated. This is wrong. Like, I feel like a piece of me. You were able to identify specifically what I think what I was able to identify with was a little bit more just tapping into my sexuality and just that, oh wow, okay, so we're not really supposed to be doing this. I'm not really sure what to even process with this. I thought I'm just here to learn, and like why is this happening to me? But then it manifested itself in other ways, I would say. um so just to validate you in that sense, but then I feel like simultaneously trauma in that aspect has come up, but from people in my life, people that are I'm related to, or um, situations of those where people didn't truly process. And I think that ultimately that's what this is about. That we need to truly take the time to talk through, walk through whatever we need to do through. Hold on 1 second.
Here.
And so, oh, my light's going out. But back to the matter at hand. So it's a response to the fact that, like, as far as work is concerned, which I feel like I've had to say this quite a few times lately where I've been talking to people, but I'm not really working as and it's more like the work, like as far as like the money, or having that stability, and building up to the goals and things that I want to have happen for myself. I feel like inevitably that's going to happen, but that it is going to happen as far as like the things that I am envisioning for my life. But maybe the way that I'm going about it, and the fact that I've been speaking about the dynamics of, for example, doula agencies, and that this is catering to a clientele that can afford doula services. So that's typically going to be um, our white individuals, and this is Texas, and this is a very difficult space to be in because we are not very clear about what systemic oppression looks like. And so just even doing work in this aspect, which I'm going to hold space in a completely separate area to talk about this, but I just have not felt safe. I felt terror working a job, and it's so simple as watching somebody's baby. And I have spoken on that, and I think that has been on pause. And so many other jobs are, I'm hired, but it's in the process. And I think right now I need to take that time to actually process myself. And so that's one thing. The other thing is, so when I did the recent live, which I did mention on this past live as well, um, just really staying grounded in the reasons why I hold space for myself when I make lives, when I talk about the things that I believe in, when I process emotions here, and I speak about experiences and things, holding, truly taking myself back to why I'm even doing this from the get-go, and to also understand that people will come to you and question why you said what you said. People will come to you and want to know more, and it may be a positive thing as well. And just truly staying grounded, which would have to be, if I have a foundation for myself and I have a word, if I have beliefs for myself set in place, I can handle those without feeling the anxiety that came about from that unwavering feeling. So that, and when a video that came from our friend Brianna that she sent me, because I was feeling down these past like week or so. I truly have been feeling emotions, but not really feeling them. I feel like I'm good. I'm here, but I can definitely sense that I really need to like sob.
Mm-hmm.
And I also feel like I really need to like go insane, like just rage on some shit. Like I don't know. But I'm sensing that I'm numbing or suppressing something and it needs to like come out. So she sent me a video that essentially talked about the fact that we tell ourselves stories over time. We apply that to the present moment. We even talked about that earlier in the live itself. And if we can let go of the stories,
Mm-hmm.
we can truly be present and we can truly move towards the things that we are doing. Same thing is like having, you know, a lack mindset and an abundant mindset. If you are truly living in an abundant mindset or believing that things will come to you and you know, and but then you're doing things that are conflicting with that, nothing is going to follow through. And I think that that's where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, just grappling with adjusting to that new mindset. So I do believe that I found individuals that I want to be a part of my tribe. I feel like this is what I have been asking for because of the fact that, you know, us as individuals, we have our families, we have like our people that we are close to, but then over time, you really, really find those people where you don't have to do all of this extra work and they love you anyway. That unconditional love. And I think that once I was able to experience that now, it feels good, and then it also can feel bittersweet if you haven't truly processed why things didn't work out in all of these blood ties and all of these other relationships that you built along the way. Um, so it's ultimately a response for me to really sit in my feelings, to really process that shit, and really like move in the ways that I'm saying that I'm going to move.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and before I don't even know where I want to go next with this because
What I will,
yeah.
because it's been coming to my attention a lot lately, has been like, and it's very much in alignment with what you just said, because changing your mindset is not enough. Like, and it's like my angels and these books, like it's things have been coming up and telling me like you need action with it. And I always tell people like it's small action steps. It's not going to be those big ones that are right in your face. It's going to be those tiny, tiny ones. Sorry about that. Those tiny, tiny ones to where you're going to have to revisit and adjust and just bring to the forefront. But it's those little changes they start to make really, really big ones. And that's where, we start to see the growth, because it's not going to happen overnight. And if you ever think it will, like, that's really where you're hindering yourself, because you want to be in that place. You want to be in that space of like expert. Yeah, my sister was just talking about that. And we all know it. Every time we want to get into an endeavor or something, like a lot of us jump to the expert mode. We want to be the best at what it is that we're doing. But when you look, there's that fourth agreement. When you truly just do your best, and if your best is at the damn, what is the amateur level, you know what I mean? Honor that. Like, just hold space for it, and really give yourself love and praise, like, yeah, you the best damn amateur on the planet, you know what I mean? Like, just just be real about where you are in your journey, and love yourself through that. Like, I find I laugh at a lot of things that I go through, because I mean, like, who, if not me, then who else? Like, I really don't want anybody else laughing at me, but I laugh at myself, because it's like, Imora, you were tripping. Like, you could have kind of did this differently or this differently, but it's me. I know myself. I know that I'm stubborn. You know what I mean? So when I am acting stubborn, instead of being like, girl, stop being so damn stubborn. You always want to be, because that's the language and the narrative that we were hearing as a child, where it's kind of like, don't be yourself. Just, I really need you to be exactly what I need you to be in this moment. for the sake of fluidity or whatever it is, but it's like, no, this is what you are right now, despite especially the fact that you don't want to be like that right now. You know, because that's the control that we want to have over our lives. You don't want to be upset right now, but you're upset that you're upset. So to be honest, you're just about to be upset. Like, unless you can hold space and be like, okay, I really don't want to be upset right now, but what am I about to do about that? Can I pick 5 things to look at and love, you know, and bring joy? Can I really try to muster a smile? Like, what is it, the tiniest thing that I can do that's going to change what I actually, and get me closer to what it is that I actually want to do, as opposed to being like, wow, I'm not there. We want to be like, oh my gosh, I'm not there. No, no, no. What can you do right now in this moment? What is in your control? And leave everything else that's not in your control for somebody else, something else. Transmute it. I don't know. Just get it out of your head, because it just doesn't have space right now. Like, there's no space in your head for it. You gotta just, you know, you really, like, that's the type of control, because those are the kinds of things, you know, we can control. When things feel overwhelming, you can control the fact that just taking space, drinking some tea, whatever it is, going outside in sunlight, it's things that are gonna feel like, you know, are in control, and those are the things that you can work with. But it's not to say that take away from, you know, the emotions that you're feeling and things like that, but more so control them a little bit. Say thank you, but no thank you. You know, I see you're here, but you really don't have to be. So I would really rather you left right now. Like, you know, and that, and it'll, you'll start to be able to recognize that you have control over those aspects and moments. But it's
Yeah,
never, you know, for,
I love. Um, okay, so you talked about, what action steps are you taking when you don't have any money?
mm,
Um, what things you normally feel abundant by? Like, what's important to you? And I think that um, when it comes to actually making true fortifying change and applying like these new things that you learn, because you may have learned something here, you may have learned something that you saw months ago, years ago, that you kind of keep scrapbooked in your mind and you don't really know how to apply, but um you in a sense need the actions
mhm.
to really bring about that change. So how do you go about that?
Yeah. um I would say revisiting like past experiences, and not to just like hold on to them and attach, but more so learn from them. You know, like what you mentioned in terms of stagnancy or like abundance. Like, if you find, okay, in an instance where like you don't have money, or maybe your fridge is empty, you know, to that extent, if you've been in a situation like that before and you've known that everything was going to be okay, you know what I mean, then most times you can be okay with the fact that you don't have any money or food in your fridge. But if you're in a space of like worry, you know what I mean, fear of just kind of like when it's going to come next, or really honestly reality, because like it can be frightening. But if you're the type of person that was normally calm in those situations, and it didn't get you anywhere, you know what I mean, it's like that's kind of showing you it's time to get up and move and get yourself out of this situation, right? But if you were more so in that space of, okay, one week or 1 month out of the year your bills are behind, you know what I mean, and it's the end of the world for you, it's because there's periods of dormancy. It's like we're flowers, we're trees, you know what I mean, we got to go through it. We have not through it in terms of negative things in this lifetime, but more so you have to be able to hold space and honor that things are not always going to be exactly what you want them to be. But is that going to cause you to uproot your entire life, and you know what I mean, and move accordingly? Like, you have to honor that, and you really have to be like, okay, I'm going to just trust that everything's okay. You know what I mean? Maybe I used to freak out every time and I realized it didn't get me anywhere. So maybe I'll just sit here and do the work. Like, because that's what we talked about too. Like, being able to sit still when things feel chaotic is doing the work, because it's not something that you would normally do. Normally you would want to react to that chaos, you would want to respond to it, you would want to let it move you, all these different things. But when you're in a space of really self-improvement and realizing that those things didn't get you anywhere before, it's like we want to get somewhere, so maybe let me try something different. And it's like I won't know what that thing is that's different, for someone else, but I'll know what it is for myself based on analyzing another situation. It doesn't necessarily have to be like completely in the past. And I feel like that's the space that we need to be in, learning from our past, not so much like holding on to it to the point where it's still moving us and it's still like hindering us.
Yes. So I think one of the last things that I will speak on before we close, besides boundaries or anything else you want to talk about, the last thing that I want to touch back on is to kind of go back a little bit because when it comes to traumatic experiences and things and just dealing with something similar to what you specifically experienced, I was actually in the ex-friend's position
Mm-hmm.
in that situation. And so the question that I would like to pose in this space is, what do you do if you witness something that's wrong or something that doesn't resonate? Because before I dive into what my scenario was, this can be like I may have seen somebody beat the crap out of their kid like right there in the moment over something that was so small. And I was just like, oh shit, Or it could be like, somebody doing something out of the ordinary or doing, really anything that is not in alignment with what we
Do.
agree to be
Mm-hmm.
okay or not okay, right? And you can see it. And I think that part of it too is going back to what you truly believe in, because some people will just like turn a blind eye.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will just kind of like internalize that and not really do anything with it. And so, um, in the space of where someone may have been violated or disrespected or whatever the case, you may be the person that person has come to talk to you about it. You may be the person that actually committed the act. You may, or, you could be the person themselves that experienced it. Um, and I want to know collectively, what should we do to truly bring about true change? Because I think that even from the person's perspective, if they did it in this scenario, I think that someone wouldn't want to take responsibility if the automatic response is, oh, like we're not going to really truly have conversation. If we've been taught that having to sit down and talk means that we're going to fight, like physically fight, or it could mean, automatically going into the prison industrial system and all these things without truly processing what was wrong or how something affected someone else. I think that that's where we're fucking up, because it's not truly helping that person. It's not
Mm-hmm.
truly making them see where they went wrong, right? So let's apply it to a different scenario. And in a case where I had invited a friend over in the initial encounter. We had been in my home the first time, and it was just, sharing space. This particular individual, we've known each other since middle school. Um, but, our relationship has not been like very close because of the fact that things have changed. We've gone our own separate ways or whatever, but there was closeness in middle school and high school or whatever. And so we connected the first time. It was cool. I believe that it was more along the lines of like, wanted to just reconnect or whatever the case. But then I also feel like I needed to actually go back, take a few steps back to see how this got to where it ultimately ended or whatever. So I want to kind of go back a little bit before to when I was actually pregnant with my first child. And when I was pregnant and I was going through that, I kind of took a social hiatus where I wasn't on social media, and I was only using it for entertainment purposes. I wasn't really communicating with people as much. I was kind of keeping my pregnancy a secret and not really talking about it because of how people treated pregnant women or pregnant individuals in high school, pretty much on social media, on MTV, literally everywhere. People are not processing pregnancy well. And so I felt like, I'd rather not showcase that or be a part of that connotation and just kind of deal with my own situation. But one thing I was doing was when things were really, really stressful for me, whether that be, through my situation with my family or with my partner or whatever I perceive to be emotionally too much, I would call friends because I'm used to like, I didn't drive, I'm pretty much stationary for a good part of my life. And so the only thing I could do was like call a friend up. But if I'm calling you up and I'm only calling you to like cry or talk to you about like a negative situation, what can be done, which I believe has happened, is that you can just like literally record all of the negative stuff and not really know the full scope of everything that happened because I'm internalizing my experience, only looking at myself, right? So this particular friend, I believe the only times that I was reaching out was to talk to her, complain to her about something that I was going through, which wasn't good as a friend, you know? But also, that was the only way that I was functioning, I think, or coping with what I was coping with, right? And so I believe that was like the last time I had ever really communicated before we had connected. And so I want to say this was maybe two years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I want to say. So she came by the first time. We were just hanging out or whatever, talking. She came again, but in this situation, I believe it was like it was like a time crunch thing. I had told her that I would meet her at a certain time, but I only had time to go to one grocery store that was nearby. And that store just so happened to be Target, right? So I'm coming home with Target groceries. Come in the house, she's pulling up, she's helping me bring the groceries in the house. Which I thought was cool. I really didn't think anything of it. But then, you gotta disassemble your groceries, put your groceries up, and like, I was gonna get dinner started or whatever. And so there was a comment made about the fact that I had Target groceries. It's like, okay, you must have money to have Target, like groceries, right? So that was the first, but I didn't really put that anywhere. I just kind of thought like, oh, well, I know and my family knows that this was the only place I could stop real quick. Hell yeah, they expensive as hell, but I'm not really finna dig deep into that. So I'm not seeing the signs, but I'm, progressing through the evening or whatever. Simultaneously, I believe my partner had an event to go to with his family. And so my friend is in the living room, my son's playing, and, we're just talking throughout the whole thing. And so ultimately what this leads into is that there is an energy shift because there was like there was a comment made about like that she may have thought that my son was trying to get affection from his father, but he kept walking away from him and wasn't acknowledging him. So she made that comment to me like, oh, Grayson's trying to hug his dad and he just won't, and so I was like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure that that's not what that's about. And it wasn't. Ultimately, I believe, my son wanted something, and my partner was just like, not right now, and I'm gonna get it later. But it looked like that to her. Mm-hmm. So that was another situation that happened. I just kind of brushed it past and didn't really take time to really sit with that and process it. But then that energy was actually affecting me. Mm-hmm. And so that ended up manifesting into me getting into a whole argument, into a whole like just confrontation with him in front of her. And ultimately, even in that argument, it was more like me disrespecting him and things that was said. Because a lot of times when I am angry, I don't necessarily pay attention to what I do or say. I just kind of like let it all just kind of come out like vomit. So a lot of things kind of happened that was playing into this narrative that was being presented by her. and then it also kind of like went along with that because it kind of looks like what she's thinking it is, right? No different than, you know, any outside family making judgments on the outside. So I played into that because this is a friend, right? And so after that altercation, he ends up leaving, but then that takes more time for us to talk, and so then the conversation shifts into because I think I was able to get our son to bed at that point, and we end up just continuing the night talking or whatever, kicking it, you know, getting lit, whatever, and so we're just literally talking through the wee hours of the night, and in that space, she chooses to say that to tell me, but it wasn't very straightforward. It was just like she wanted to she wasn't sure to tell me because she didn't want to be kicked out or whatever the case. Side note, we have not talked about this or processed this yet, but I'm just bringing it up to talk about because Imora shared her aspect because I was in a different position. So she is the person coming to me saying, well, you know, essentially that my partner did something that was violating to her. Meanwhile, for me, I'm watching her the entire night. I believe that I can see everything that is transpiring in my home, like literally, you know, from the situation that was at hand. And so not really knowing what to do was the first thing that I thought. But then I had to make a decision. You know, I don't think it wasn't necessarily me saying that I don't think he meant it that way. Never said that. But I feel like what I did was give her the space to say everything that she felt she needed to say. Because it was that. Then it also led into, well, I think he's cheating. I think it's this.
Mm-hmm.
And I have connections to, you know, the experiences in my life and my family's life. So there's a lot in that for me to have to process in one night, right? And so from there, we talked and then, you know, she ended up leaving or whatever. But then I just kind of made the decision to take a break from her and not to really like continue reaching out. But what she did though, she did definitely, like, she would text, but it was more like shifting it to me being a single mom, because like we together have made this conclusion about him, because I allowed her to say what she felt she needed to say and give her that space. And then it was like, oh, I want to see you again, I want to take you to church, I want to like do all these different things with you. And then I just ultimately needed to take time to process that. And so we didn't necessarily speak or see each other again. But when my partner came home, I definitely brought that up and like talked to him about it. It was a lot to really deal with because you had just been disrespected by me. It was a lot that was happening. Then we argued. Then, you know, not only that, when he went out, it was like some other things that happened while he was out. So for him to come back and then it's like, okay,
accusation.
Someone feels or that you did this to them, then it's like, what the fuck? Like, fuck you, fuck them. Like, what has happened? Like, I don't get it. And so that is a lot. And I feel like each individual in that scenario, there needs to be space held for each person. But then I also believe that I had to ultimately make a decision on how I wanted to process that, because I definitely internalized that. Like, what is she going to do with this information? Like, now it's like it's going to transform into me being a person that was complicit in disrespect or complicit in violation or abuse or whatever. But then that ultimately was me making assumptions. And so, but ultimately I had to feel those things because that's what I felt, you know? So I felt like part of me too didn't necessarily get to be very clear with her about what my lifestyle was like. I don't think she necessarily asked, or there was enough conversation to really connect everything together. I think for that particular experience that she says that she had, there wasn't enough conversation. Like, we should have just sat down and talked about it right then and there, or set a separate time because of the way everybody, the timing of leaving and returning. We should have had a separate time to really talk about it. And I think that we weren't all ready to do that. Maybe that's something that we can do forward. But we did meet again recently. Um, after I had my daughter, so that would have been around 2020. Yeah, 2020. Sometime we went out and we just went out and did stuff together, and it was pretty cool. Like I didn't have like not a good time. I had a good time. But I think it was more like an awkwardness, of course, because the last time that we had physically seen each other was that instance. But I think that what was wrong was we talked for so long. We talked about so many different things. But I think what was wrong was we didn't necessarily set separate time to talk about that so that we could process it. So I, I want I want to be able to know, that we did do that. And and I believe that you can process trauma
Back.
yeah. It's like it keeps timing out. I don't know. It's like the screen goes dark. I gotta keep tapping it, and then it says it's paused. But yeah, I just wish that me and this individual had really had a separate time to process that situation so we could truly move forward and have a relationship out, through that. But that's not to say that we won't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just wanted to share that because I was definitely embarrassed. I felt like, I can't really talk to people about this shit because the ultimate response would be like, oh, he did that shit. Because that's just how people respond. Um, or, there wasn't space for myself. There wasn't, really, really time because of how I have dealt with things in the past, with things that have been difficult. So, um, yeah, I'm pretty much sharing it now um, because I want to talk about how do you truly hold space in situations like that where things can get misconstrued or things can happen, and sometimes it won't necessarily be as damaging. It can be in other ways, but it can be harmful things that can occur in conversation and in exchanges because we all are in different places of growth. And I just want to think about, like, doesn't it make more sense to just like really talk the same way that we talk about BS? So we talk about life and we talk about all these different things that we feel. Shouldn't we just have that true conversation or that true sit down about it? It doesn't have to be awkward. It doesn't have to be harmful. And I think that where we get messed up is like we all want one person to be the one that's right. Like we want to be the only one that's right in that moment. And I think that what we should do is have those spaces for each person to share after they process, as we said before, but truly get out what you took from that experience and what you felt,
Yeah.
because you don't want to have fake apologies. And that was the other thing that I wanted to say as well, because you talked about the fact that the guy in that scenario, he didn't give a sincere apology, but to I want to connect that to the fact that we have been taught to give fake apologies.
Mm-hmm.
Like a kid falls or something, or you like accidentally step on their toe and you're like 4, you're like, tell him sorry.
Yeah.
But you're that feels sorry because you're a grown ass person. So like so I saw this scenario before where it's like, how about you as the grown up say, I'm so sorry that this happened to you, and then bring it upon the child. Like this particular person is hurt. So what do you think we should do? That makes more sense.
Yes.
Like I saw it a few weeks back, and that made more sense to me than forcing a kid to say,
Oh,
I'm sorry, they don't mean it.
mm,
So now you're in a situation where you have harmed somebody and
yep.
you don't know how to truly feel feelings and apologize.
Yes, big time. And it starts young. It's like we have to see it. We literally have to see it. And then but it happens because we are learning as we grow. And that's why what you mentioned about literally not having all the tools or the rule book when you have children, you're learning with your children. You're learning from your past experiences to say, hey, I'm not gonna, or I would rather not teach my child to apologize all willy nilly, because to be honest, it takes away intention and it takes away lack of responsibility. And like you said, where's the processing of the feelings right then and there now that you've hurt somebody? Like, do you really feel anything? Like, or do you know what you feel when that happens? Because, like, now you're in a space where you got to face yourself. And for the longest time, we were not facing ourselves because we didn't necessarily have that freedom as children. You think, oh, a child doesn't really know what they want. No, they know everything that they want. To be honest, a lot of times they need guidance to say, okay, I know you want to wear like your Spider-Man suit out all damn week. Like my little brother literally used to do that from like he was 2 to 5 wanting to wear his Spider-Man suit. And it's like, okay, we gave him space and freedom to do that. But when it, you know, it's like you can't wear it all the time to the grocery store or it's snowing outside. Like, things like that. Like, of course, we can't really give him what he wants because it's a matter of his health. So now we have to work with the child and really just to say, I want to guide you through this because this is what I'm here to do. But we cannot control all aspects of anybody. And get into the deepness of holding space for all three parties involved. Like, yes, that is really, really important. And what we should carry moving forward is everybody giving their perception or their perspective. You know what I mean? Because it's different. My eyes don't see what your eyes see, like point blank. They just don't. Tan may look a little orange to me. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's just that's the way life is. And you really have to, one, validate your own feelings, but also, even if you do not understand where these feelings are coming from another person, you need to hold space for it. Like, to me, that's something that I cannot fold on, because when I realize that I'm not holding space for somebody, it's like, damn, like, they don't deserve it or something. You know what I mean? Like, why is it that you can't hold space for something that you don't understand? And most times it's fear. You know what I mean? Like, we fear the unknown, we fear what we don't understand, we fear change. Like, I know I do. I'm not gonna say, I'm not gonna put any of that on y'all, but I know me personally, like, all these things I experience. So why is it that I can't hold space for another person to experience them too? And really not have a reasoning behind it. Like, I don't have to always know why. Like, the why, it does not always have to be there. But I agree, the three of you definitely had needed to sit down and talk through. And I think too, what came to mind when you were mentioning y'all's relationship to begin with, and the fact that you would call and talk about the pressing things on your mind or the things you needed to get off your chest, and that only being her one perspective. Like, even taking that in, even being someone that someone comes to, like, you really have to do that with a grain of salt. And you can't, you really, I want to say can't, it's like, you should refrain from taking on exactly what it is that they're giving, or just personally what it is that someone's going through, because you can be there for somebody, but that doesn't mean that now you have to take on what they're experiencing. So what it seems like, and I don't want to assume so, but what it seems like is that that friend, obviously from a place of love, did not want you in a situation, you know what I mean, that you should not be in. And
Yeah,
operating from that,
I agree.
yeah, like, operating from that, she was just kind of like, well, all of this adds up to me, 1 + 1 = 2 type of thing. And it's like, well, hold on now, because there's still all of these other numbers, or like 1 + 5 = 6. And it's like, well, what about 3, 2, and 4, or 2, 3, 4? So, in the in between. So we don't always have everything. We don't always have the full story. That's one thing to keep in mind. And I feel like there's universal law tied to this. You know what I mean? And it takes delving into and really having something to kind of revisit. But right now, it's just based on like my experiences and what I know I like and what I know that I don't like. And you never know what someone else is feeling, what they're thinking all the time. Like, you just don't. All you really have is what someone is giving you, and you just have to think about what they're not giving you though too, and just really hold space for the opportunity for anything to happen, for this person to feel extreme joy or to feel extreme like trauma, fear. Like you never know when you're completely, I don't know, fucking up somebody's life, or when you're completely adding immense value to it. Like you really just, you got to be ready for whatever, because that's what this life, I feel like, is teaching us. And in the midst of everything, honor the joy and the bliss, but also hold space for the fact that you're not okay. Because when you don't hold space for that, you feel like you need to be something outside of yourself, and you're not.
No,
You can only be yourself.
you're right. Um, Natasha Barrow says, I've also learned that even apologizing as a parent to your child helps wonders, or even saying, please forgive me. I definitely,
Yes.
yes, I have spoken about this, and I would love to continue having conversations about different ways of unlearning toxic behaviors and relearning to either parent ourselves or also parent our children. So I want to go on that journey this year and really have space where we can dive into the ways that we can really really create true change for the next generation of human beings, because um they are the next generation of adults, and I don't feel like it's right to put it onto the next wave of movement and change to have to go through things that they don't necessarily have to go through. There was something else we talked about too, just me being a birth worker. When I have gone into hospital spaces and coercion happens, when trauma and harm happens, a lot of times, sometimes, I will freeze up, and I think that that's a lack of what a lot of these doula trainings fail to include when it comes to what advocacy looks like, which you have to ultimately believe that coercion can happen. You have to believe that, harm can happen um, first. And
Hmm.
then when it comes to allowing birth workers into space, like, um,
You have to believe in birth workers.
you have to believe in birth workers. And then with my clients, sometimes, they ultimately will feel like, you did the best that you could do, and I love the support that you gave, and it was great. And it's like, yeah, I do believe that I did the best that I could do with what I had, but part of it is like, why didn't I, say something to that doctor? Why am I really scared of getting kicked out of the hospital and not being able to see my client, and that possible fear of them being cut open if I'm not there? Or, like, diving into why those things happen, because that's just as valid as the situations that we discussed earlier. And yeah, I really think that it all is boiling down to the fact that I also need support in that aspect as well. It puts a lot. I don't care what doula you are interviewing or whatever to be at your birth or to do whatever for you. It takes a lot. Like, for every birth, you need like 3 to 4 weeks, honestly,
Yeah.
to recover from the exhaustion
Uh,
of being there, being present for you, and holding space. Then on top of that, if you have, things that necessarily go wrong, and it doesn't have to always be something so dramatic. It can be, the smallest things. It can manifest in so many different ways for that individual that has come to support you. And we have the skills, but a lot of us, like me personally, I've had to go and learn
mhm.
skills or connect with other people to learn how to process and have separate time to talk through the shit that I be seeing and the stuff that I be hearing, or just even, just the overall aspects. So I think that, you know, boundaries,
Yeah.
holding space for self, having true foundation and beliefs for yourself.
And integration. What'd you say?
No, just everything else. You can add on to all the things.
Yeah, I was gonna say integration would seem like the last, like it felt like you were kind of giving steps, if you will, or like takeaways mainly, and then to
Yeah.
all of that, integrating it in our lives, and as you think about your birth work, like you see how the work that we can do for self, right? The work that we can do for our children, and that's really I'll say innocent beings, or those who are kind of like, we're entrusted with their energies, right? And then of course, like personal relationships, other people that we deal with who are, we're not really in a constant teaching or guiding moment, but there are always room and spaces for that. And when you can integrate it in your everyday lives and in what you do, you're gonna be in a constant state of growth. Like, it's just gonna happen naturally because you're not closing yourself off to experiences. As a nanny, like, I've always been a nanny, if you will, and that's like the best way to kind of like loop it. But I'm a caretaker. Like, I take and give care. Like, that's overarching for everything that I do. But I was working in management right before the stay home ordinance and everything like that. And so I had to adjust. And so I went back to nannying, but it wasn't enough for me to just watch after children. It was literally like, I'm seeing my reactions to certain things. I'm seeing my frustrations. I'm seeing that, I can ruin a child's life, by being like, yo, like, you tripping right now, you crying over so and so, but it ain't that deep. Just having that type of mindset or mentality, or just really pushing my own agenda onto someone else. Like, you see how that does not work, and you see how, if you're really if you really care, or if it's really something important to you, you know what I mean, you're going to make the necessary changes, or you're going to make the little steps, the little action steps to really move forward and integrate properly. But it does start with self. It starts.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was a lot to really process, and I'm excited that we finally got it out here for individuals to learn from, to resonate with, to connect with other people and spark new waves of change. And I really want to see how we can make a way for people to learn how to do these things, like to really dive deeper and create a more attainable way to access this, and to really create spaces for them to really tap into that. Because it's one thing to listen, and it's another thing to really have that time to process it together as a community. And I want to explore that. So if anyone is interested in that, definitely leave me a comment, or DM or whatever, when you see my upcoming posts, because I have a lot of projects coming this year, and I definitely want that to be one of them.
Yes, for sure. And I want to integrate moving forward the work that I do, because it always brings it back to self. And I always say I'm a child, and like, in general, we parent ourselves. Like, it's just so many correlations. So this work is not limited. It's not limited to like young, old, white, black, like none of that. It's human work, and it's really a bridge to the spiritual, because to operate in that space of spiritual, like, you need balance. And it's really, it's choice. You want to either be in that humanistic mindset all the time, or you want to bridge the two, and experience spirituality and bliss and joy.
Yes.
I'm
Thank you so much. I have learned a lot more than I did the first time we talked, and I definitely feel really good. So yeah, this was the Iconoclast series um, of 2021. We were talking about the four agreements. If you enjoyed this, definitely share with someone else. If you want to support me in any way, or Made by Mora, any of our Black owned businesses, I will list that information in the description of this live. And yeah, that was everything. I hope everyone that stayed to the end, I really appreciate y'all for sure. Anyone that came in, left comments, thank you. And everybody have a great night. Get some rest. Appreciate you.
Love y'all. Good night.
Yeah. See you.